Welcome back. We have now briefly discussed our process with our client. From his point of view, it looks quite promising. However, there is one point we need to work on again, and that is the dispatch of the goods. In our model process, this is a self-contained process. In reality, however, the goods are dispatched by an external service provider. And this is not clear from our process diagram. We need to change that. And in order to model this accordingly, we need to look at another BPMN concept, namely the so-called pools or participants. Pools can be used to separate internal business processes from the processes of external participants such as customers, suppliers, or partners. So-called lanes can also be added to the pools, but we'll come to that later. Let's take a detailed look at the concept of pools and lanes in a dry run before we integrate them into our process later. Because I admit, the concept is not so easy to understand. But don't worry, we'll get it right. I'll now take this empty workspace and drag a pool into it. Looks pretty unspectacular at first. You can give the pool a name on the left-hand side, but before we do that, we should clarify what this pool actually represents. I would like to explain this to you with an example which also fits to the name of this tool perfectly. Imagine that a pool in BPMN is like a large swimming pool. Each pool belongs to a specific company. So if you have a BPMN diagram, you can think of each pool as a separate area that belongs to a specific company, organization, or participant. Different things happen in this area that belongs to the company. In our process, for example, a pool represents our online retailer. The transport service provider that ships the goods is not part of this organization. It lives on its own property, so to speak, and therefore also has its own pool. In our case, we therefore have a second pool for our service provider, which we call the transport service provider. So far, so good. However, a pool for a company may be a very rough subdivision. Every larger company consists of different departments that are often involved in one and the same process. To take this into account, we can divide the pools into different lanes. You can use lanes to represent different departments, teams, or roles within the same organization, so to speak, in the same pool as required. Let's assume we have an order fulfillment department and an accounting department that takes care of cash flows. We call this the financial department. So now we have divided our pool for the online retailer into two lanes. One lane takes care of the order fulfillment and the other takes care of everything to do with payments. It all looks nice and tidy and easy to follow. But now comes something that makes the whole thing a little complicated at the first glance. Okay, I admit, even at the second glance. Within a pool, your process, or better your sequence flow, can move back and forth between the lanes of a pool, according to the tasks that are to be processed within a pool by a suitable responsible person or unit. The situation is different between different pools. No sequence flow can go back and forth between the pools. But what sense does it then make to use different pools? And how can these pools communicate with each other? We will look at this in the next chapter. Well, as we heard in the last chapter, sequence flows cannot cross the boundaries of their pool. Why is that? Because pools represent independent process areas. Each pool represents an independent process or organizational unit, and the activities within a pool are relevant to the internal process flow. Sequence flows in BPMN are used to define the sequence of activities within a process or organizational unit, here represented by a pool. They show the direct path from one activity to the next within the same process or context. Therefore, sequence flows cannot leave their pool. But how do different pools interact with each other? Good question, and time for another concept in BPMN. The communication or interaction between different pools, so to say, between different processes or organizational units, is represented by message flows. Message flows show the exchange of information or messages between pools and emphasize the independence of the process. They make it clear that an exchange of information takes place beyond the boundaries of one's own process area. But be aware, the token of a process can only move on sequence flows. This means that the token never leaves its pool. To summarize, sequence flows represent the internal process sequence within a pool, while message flows represent a communication between different pools. Please keep this in mind. What does this look like in a process diagram? Message flows are shown in BPMN with a dashed arrow, with the arrow indicates the direction of flow of the communication. Messages to another pool can be triggered by activities or the end event, for example. In this case, this is the sender side. We have not yet modeled anything in our pool for the transport service provider, but that is also possible. In this case, it's a so-called black box. The processes at this unit are either unknown or the exact process is not relevant for us, as we assume that the receiver side will handle the message we send correctly. In this case, we connect our message flow directly to the pool. Basically, we can say that when a message flow is connected to an entire pool, this usually symbolizes that the message or information is sent to an entire process or organizational unit without referring to a specific element within that pool. It is assumed that the process within the pool handles the message accordingly. However, it often makes more sense to link a message flow directly to a specific event or task in a pool. This indicates that the message is directly linked to a specific activity. The decision as to whether a message flow is linked to an entire pool or a specific element within the pool depends on the context of the business process and how detailed the information flow is to be displayed. In more complex processes, it is often helpful to link message flows directly to relevant events or tasks to show clear and specific communication between processes. But with the message flow come more challenges, or rather opportunities, to model our processes in more detail. In the next few chapters, we will take a look at some simple examples and introduce a couple of new elements along the way. See you in the next chapter. Don't be surprised, I switched to my desktop tool, the modeler from Camunda. This is the big version of BPMN.io because there's a really cool feature here that I want to show you later. But here we go. Let's take a look at the messages using a simple example. An appointment with a friend to dinner in a restaurant. So we have two independent parties here. What do I need for this? Correct, two pools. So me and my buddy. We'll stick to our normal start event and call the process start dinner with my buddy. What do I have to do first? I ask my friend if he wants to go out for dinner with me tonight. So we create an activity to send an appointment request. As this request will also trigger some kind of process at my friend, we create a start event and connect the task of the appointment request and the start event with a message flow. We now label the message flow with a type of message, so date request. The label should be clear and precise in order to describe the content and purpose of the message. Labeling message flows is helpful but not always necessary. In some cases, the context of a flow is sufficiently self-explanatory, so the label can be dispensed with. Okay, my buddy is now checking his calendar to see if he has time tonight. I assume he is up for it too. In that case, he'll send me a brief confirmation. So another task, send date confirmation. Again, a message is exchanged. So I connect the message flow to my pool and name it. Okay, what next? Yep, I still need to book a table. And I'm going to do that now. For the sake of simplicity, I'll only consider the case where my reservation is successful. So I let my buddy know that the reservation worked out and our date is set, and connect our new task with a message flow to my buddy's pool and name the flow. Then we've got it. So I create two more end events and label them with the end result of the process. So far it's all old news for you. But let's take a look at the start event in my buddy's pool. When does the process start? Exactly, when he receives my request. This means that the process start is no longer arbitrary. but clearly defined. It reacts to an incoming message, and BPMN has its own type of start event for this, namely the message start event. What does it do? A message start event clearly indicates that the process started by receipt of a message outside the process. This helps to clearly identify the type of process trigger and avoid misunderstandings. And that is precisely one of the tasks of process diagrams, to create clarity and identify weak points. In short, the message start event improves the accuracy and clarity of how and why the process starts, especially in an environment where communication with external systems or stakeholders is critical. Now, if we think away this message flows, that means my friend's process is started by using the message start event. However, as he does not receive a message in this diagram, the message start event indicates that the process will never start. With a normal start event, the question of when and how the process is started would be completely open. With this small change, we have significantly increased information content and meaningfulness of the diagram. So now you've got to know another start event, and we're already a step further. In the next chapters, I will show you why our process, as it is now, will not run as we might imagine, and how we can find this out using the token simulation of the Camunda modeler. See you in the next chapter. Here we are again. I've now loaded the Token Simulator plugin in the modeler, and we're going to take a look at how our process is now executed and where there might still be weak points. By the way, in the last section of this course you will find a lesson on how to get the modeler and how to install the plugin. But please stay here for now. The Token Simulator in Camunda's modeler is a tool that allows you to simulate the flow of a token through a BPMN diagram. A token, in this context, represents a flow through the process similar to a piece of work flown through the process. When you use the token simulator, you can see how the token moves through the different elements of the diagram, such as tasks, gateways, and events. This helps to understand how the process will actually work when it is executed. But first, let me briefly explain how you can interpret what you're about to see. Let's take a look at a screenshot. The first thing we have here are the process tokens, which are represented by colored dots. Here we have two independent processes communicating with each other, each in its own pool. And we have the messages that move via the message flows. These are shown with gray dots. What we see here, by the way, is a collaboration diagram. This is a type of diagram that visualizes the interaction between different participants, such as organizations or departments, working together. It shows how messages are exchanged between these participants in order to achieve a certain goal. This type of diagram is particularly useful for understanding how different organizational units or external partners interact in a process and how communication takes place between them. It provides a clear view of the interfaces and can help to identify areas of improvement or potential problems in the collaboration. But enough preamble. Just a quick reminder. In our process, we ask a friend if he wants to have dinner with us. The friend checks their diary and gives us a go-ahead. Once we have the okay, we book a table at a restaurant and let our friend know that our date is on. I run the process through the token simulator as it is in the following chapter. I put this in a separate chapter because it probably makes sense for you to watch a simulation several times. Pay attention to the tokens and the messages, especially whether we can actually find the process just described in words in our diagram. I'll see you again after the simulation in the resolution chapter.